talk for a talk I'm giving in Austin, so you're all guinea pigs today. Hopefully it won't be too rough, this talk, but by all means chime in if you've got any questions or feedback you want to give during it. And if you see me make mistakes when coding, please do correct me. So this talk's about MVVM cross, so really it's about cross-platform coding, using MVVM, using C#, with the aim of shipping really, really delightful native apps that your users, whether they're business users or consumer users, that they'll love, that they'll use, will make your business's money, however you make that money, and that you do it without losing all of your hair in the way that I've lost all mine. So, you know, the challenges are out there with the number of devices that are coming onto the market. I mean, we've all come probably from Windows backgrounds, you know, with Wintel owning 90–95% of the market. The stats at the moment are just incredible with the way things are changing. Android allegedly has 15 activations every second. And to put that into context, McDonald's sell 17 Big Macs every second. So the number of these devices that are coming out, Apple as well, obviously, they don't have quite the sales that Android has, but the people who are buying them are really very influential Americans, particularly, and they have a huge chunk of the market, and they are people who buy apps. So we, as people who are developing internally in companies or people who are developing externally, we need to look at these different marketplaces, and you know, you will be asked as developers, yes, you've got your Windows, yes, you've got your web, can I also have native apps for iPhone and Android? And by the way, can you do it from the same code base? We can ship tomorrow. So really this is just about MVVM cross, which is the way the techniques that I've put together and the techniques that I've, you know, with friends and colleagues have put in place to try and develop these things. It is a work in progress. This is about Hot Tuna version 3, which is on the verge of being beta at the moment. But it's definitely a work in progress and evolving. They are very good development techniques, in my opinion, but we are still progressing forwards. So what hopefully we're going to go through today is I'm going to try and do as much hands-on code as I can. I hope you don't mind that. I hope you're all developers and you quite like that. I won't spend too much time with you watching me type because that gets boring. So there will be some blue pizza moments with this one I made earlier. But that'll go down well with American. And I'll try and get into it as early as possible and then come back to some theory and some goals about what we're trying to do within the coding. Then back into some hands-on. Then I'll talk about some of the apps people have made using the framework out there. And then also just a little bit I'll talk about the future and some of the things that might be happening. I'm notoriously bad at predicting the future. I can tell you that in 1998 when I first tried JavaScript I knew it was dead. So predicting the future is very hard, but I'll have a go. So, also because this is in America and it's in Texas, which is the home of Sheldon Cooper, so I'll try and talk during this talk a little bit about some heroes as well. And my first hero in this is Don Box, who some of you will know from Microsoft, and the king of com, I'm sure will go down very well at the Xamarin Conference. Yes, no good. The reason that he's on my hero list is because way back in 2000, he gave a talk here in London at the .NET 1 launch. Big conference, Bill Gates flew over, there was huge security, all that sort of thing. But the talk he gave was very hands-on. It was basically done with Notepad with a command line compiler. And he demonstrated all the sorts of things you can do with .NET. So he made sure that in several lines of Notepad, he called into register assembler, he called into COM, he called C++ and did unsafe code, and then he returned output, which was just, you know, ultimately heroic, showing what you can do from managed code. And the second demo he gave was just really quite a small bit of code. It was a tight loop that generated strings, and it showed how fast managed code was, because he did the same code in C++, and he showed that, you know, basically C++, when it hasn't got the managed memory, it hasn't got garbage collection, it took about 10 times as long because it was spending all of its time looking for holes in the heap, clearing up the heap, trying to do it all, but basically C#, managed memory that just chunks and shrinks all the time, did it for you. So you will hear lots at the moment about, you know, how C++ is faster. Microsoft's message at the moment is C++ is faster. You know, the games business, C++ is faster. It's not really true. C# and managed memory gives you an awful lot, and so that's why Don Box is a hero. I think he's off doing Xbox, I think, he's still the hero to me. Right, so that's a little interlude already, started with that. Let's get on to some hands-on code. Now, I'm not going to start from a complete nothing, I'm going to start from a basic project. And basically what I've done is I've created, I'm guessing most of you in the room are already a little bit familiar with MVVM, so I'm not going to go into too much. I've created what's called a portable class library. So a portable class library is it's basically a C# library, but instead of compiling against a specific version of .NET, like .NET 4.5, or the Silverlight runtime for Windows Phone, or WinRT for Windows Store, what it does is it compiles against a subset of all of them, and that means that you can write this once and reuse it against all of them. So you can reuse the same binaries, and you can, if you want to, actually reuse the project. So things like resharp will work across the entire tree. Prior to doing this, and I guess some of you know this from Silverlight work, some of you know it from WPF work, and some of you know it from Windows Store work, you have to create separate projects for each of these and then file, link, or copy them between. And if you then use resharper, one of them will correct and the others will break. Using portable class libraries, you don't get that. You get one copy of everything. And so that's why I'm really keen on using these. The disadvantage, however, is obviously that by using portable class libraries, you only get that subset of functionality. So you will hit times, quite frequently, where you can't do everything you wanted to do. And when you do that, you have to work around it with techniques like injecting mechanisms, like plugins. And I'll talk about some of those, hopefully, during this talk. So in this portable class library, we've got very few things that I've set up already. I have referenced some magic libraries, so you're missing out on the board with here. So I've referenced some libraries which have been serious to my opinion. These are open source libraries at the top. But basically, you've got some MVVM libraries in there at the top. This is pre-NuGet at the moment, so if you remember how to code pre-NuGet, you have to add these references manually. NuGet is coming. Hopefully next month we've got 2.5 release of NuGet. When that's out there, we can then do that across Monotouch and Monotroid, we hope. And so we'll be able to do it more effectively across multiple as well. So you just have to know that you're integrated with these for now. And then there is one file at the bottom here called the app. And the app is the app is the app. It's a very exciting file, as you can see. And what we have within this app at the moment, I hope this is big enough for everyone. It should be, and if not, then you shouldn't sit at the back like I would. And basically, this app is a MVX application, so it's kind of the flow that all of your apps will take, whether they're on Windows Phone or Windows Store, or Monotroid or Monotouch, or Xamarin or Android, or Xamarin iOS, as they're now called. And you can see that all this app does is it says, actually, when I start up, can you please show a home view model? Yeah? And that's it. That's all that's in there. You may, as you go through, discover other things you want to do there. You might want to register some things with inversion of control with a central hub. And you can do that very straightforwardly in this code. You know that there will be this app and some magic will call it on startup, no matter what platform you're on, and you can do things. So that's that. The other things that I've got here are some value converters, which we're going to talk about, and some view models. So those of you, it sounds like most of you do, already know, view models, I set up a few here. These will look like code that you're already familiar with. So if we look at home view model, then it inherits from a base class. MVVM Cross, for good or for bad, uses Smurf naming. So if you're familiar with Smurfs, you know that there's Papa Smurf, Baby Smurf, and Chopper Smurf, and all those other stuff. Every class in MVVM Cross starts with MVX. Apologies for that, it's not something I particularly like, but it's the way we start and we carry on. So you'll always know when you look at code whether or not it's in the library or not, whether it's in your own code. But that's what we've got here. So we've got a home view model, just off the screen, and it inherits from MVX view model. Within it, we've got a nested class for menu items. And then, sorry, I'm just struggling with the zoom. We've got some normal looking code. So if you look at it, there's a public property with items in there, and hopefully it just looks like normal code to you. If we look at a more detailed one of the things we'll drill down into, let's look at colors view model. Then again, hopefully this will just look like normal MVVM code to you. So you can see there's a colors view model. It's got a constructor in which it sets array, it's a private variable, and then updates. And then down the bottom here are just properties. Yeah? And when those properties change, we call raise property change, which uses an iNotification property change message to propagate to the UI. Yeah, so all of you who've done MVVM light code or calendar microcode or any of those types of frameworks, or even if you just rolled your own using identified property change, hopefully that looks all very familiar to you and just normal code. Yeah? So there's nothing magic in there, and all of these are the same. Most of these are very trivial classes. Yeah, so hopefully none of those will look, they also have all world type things, particularly complicated. And that's it, that's all that's in there. And then onto that we add the UI project. So that core sits there, and that core is there for all applications. It's very easy to create a new project, create a new core, put it in there. And then we add on the UI projects. So I'll just start with Windows Phone. This is kind of a complete UI project, Chris. And you can see it looks pretty much like a normal Windows Phone project. There's one special class that's in here called Setup. And it is a MVX phone setup, so again it uses Smurf menus, so you know that it's in there. Just make the screen a little bigger so I can scroll. And you can see it just takes a phone frame as its constructor. It then, on startup, it gets called and asked to create an app. Yeah, so at runtime you can create anything else if you wanted to, but what this is creating is that app you saw, the thing that says Home View. Yeah, so it's nothing particularly exciting. It then has got some gunk in here about a thing called plugins. Now I'll talk about plugins a bit more later, but basically what this is saying at the moment is it's saying I like a JSON plugin, so something that serializes JSON. And the reason it's in this library is because it's actually not because it's not portable. It's in there because it's optional. Yeah, if you don't want to use the JSON library that I'm using for most of my code, which is JSON.NET, if you want to use Service Stack because it is faster, you can use a different one. Yeah, and that's just replacing that plugin. The other plugins we've got in the bottom are things for colour and for visibility. Because things like colour, they're not portable. Yeah? If you go to iPhone, then colour is initialized as a UI colour object, or a CG, a core graphics colour object. And that's nothing to do with a system.windows or media colour. And obviously, if you actually go between Windows Phone and Windows Store, as I guess some of you will know, that also changes namespace. It's a different object on those two things. So you can't put that into the portable class library. You have to actually use an abstraction, in which case, you'll be surprised here, it starts in MVX. It's an MVX color. And then you use a plugin, which just magically in the background adapts that abstraction. So again, we'll see that working in a moment. And that's it. That's all there is to set up. So it's not very complicated thing. And then there is a little bit of code in app, which is different to the normal, and I'll locate it for you. So basically in the constructor for app, we do create all these setup objects. So, starting from a blank framework, you can do this very quickly, very easily. And then the other places, we do actually intercept the navigation mechanism. So when you first start up, like normally we'll go to something like main page.app, because it's in the configuration. And what we do is we actually intercept that, and there's a bit of code that's in every app, as it were. And we say cancel that navigation the first time, and instead try and get hold of this app start thing. And that was, if you remember, the thing in the application, so go to have view on it. And it says let that do the starting instead. Yeah? Now, obviously, there are other things you can do here. If you're looking at bookmarks or live tiles, you might want to go somewhere else and start up. But that's the mechanism, and that's it. That's all that's changed from a basic Windows Phone project. Yeah? Except the magic. We have a folder called Views. And you'll start to see, well, there must be some other magic going on, because you have a folder called View, you have a folder called Views, but I haven't seen any other wiring, it seems to just happen. And this is really part of the way we work. So if you've ever worked with ASP.NET MVC on the web server side, you'll know they use a lot of convention in terms of actually putting things together. We do the same thing. We have a folder called Views, and if you happen to have a class in there that looks like a view, we say it's a view. And if it happens to be called Home View, we think, oh, I wonder if that's got anything to do with Home View model. We link the two together. Yeah, if it happens to be Colours View, and you've got a Colours View model, we link the two together. There are ways of opting out of that and doing it especially, making it that one to N and N to Y, however you'd like to. But that's the basic way we do it. So each of these will look like a normal page. Yeah? You'll see that there's very little code in the code behind, just as we like doing with MVVM. So this is the Colours View. You can see that instead of, normally this would inherit from a phone application page, what's it normally called, a phone application page. But instead of that, we inherit from an MVX phone page. And then in the XAML, it looks exactly like the XAML you would expect. So here we have, if the designer loads for me, we have some normal XAML. And if I just minimize this and go to the XAML view, I don't get on with the designer or with Blend or any of those things, sorry. But the XML editor I'm quite at home with. And that's the story across most of the platforms, really. I'm quite at home with nothing in the designers. So if we just take a look at this, then you'll see that it looks like normal code in that it's got binding, two-way binding set up for red, green, and blue, and for the color. So if we just run this thing up magically, I haven't shown you home view. Home view is also the same type of thing. In the code behind, there's nothing. In the XAML itself, there is a list box. So you can see there's just a list box with a data template that binds the name and show command for each item. So if we just run this up, I'm running in Windows Phone 7 emulator, and the reason for that is Windows Phone 8 emulator doesn't like my laptop. But there's no reason you can't run in Windows Phone 8 as well, and you can develop projects just for Windows Phone 8 if you want to. It's got a lovely splash screen. It's got a lovely page title. If we go to colours, then you'll see that this has been linked to the view model. If you remember, the view model initially set red to 255, so you can see it's over there. And if we change these things, if I can change these things, then you will see that as you change these things, the colours change exactly as you'd expect. Yeah. For this also, for value converters, I didn't talk about those. We have, because we are using Windows Phone, and Windows Phone likes to have value converters put into app.xaml and resource dictionaries, we have put them in manually in this case. We couldn't do that by convention at the moment, just because of the way XAML works. So you'll see they're all merged in terms of being a colour converter. Right, so that's a Windows Phone project. Would you like to see a Windows Store project? Do you all know Windows Store is? This is the Windows Store user group. I can quickly create one on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd like to see one?
Yeah.
So if you want to take the same project and you want to create one, this is going to be speed coding. Let's hope it works, I say. So what you do is you go add new project. We don't want an Android application, we want a Windows Store. We're going to create a blank app. It's going to be called value conversion .ui.windows Store. And we create it, hopefully it comes back. Right, so we create that, and we see that inside there's the normal gunk. We get rid of the main page. Nobody really likes main page, do they? So we get rid of main page. We'll take a look at app.xaml, and we'll open up the code behind. In here, as I've said, we kind of need a setup project. So what we'll do is, actually let me just add some references. That's a good first step. So we're going to add references. This isn't a NuGet world, as I said, so we're going to add them by file. So what we do is we go and we find a lib directory where MVX is living. And you'll see there are all these different library projects, library folders. And what I'm going to do first is add the portable one. So I'm going to add cross core, which is the core library, and MVVM, cross, and I'll add them. And then I'm also going to add from the Windows Store libraries, I'm going to add the Windows Store cross. I'm going to add the Windows Store here. I'm going to add some plugins to colour. So let's add the colour there. Oops. And then I would also, did I select all of those? We'll find out. I'd also like to add the visibility just so I can do these demos as well. Let me see what I managed to actually click on and add. Okay, so those are the things I've added in. Hopefully I've remembered the right things. There is a bit of magic to that at the moment. That should get easier when you get 2.5 comes out. But as you can see, we've just added them in. Right, so back into the code. What I'd like to do, I hope it's big enough for everyone to see, is I'd like to create a setup class. As I say, every UI project needs a setup class. So this was going to inherit from an MVX store setup, which hopefully I've got the right name. So, and ReSharper, is everyone a ReSharper user? Good. So ReSharper will notice where that is and add it in for me. It's then going to tell me that I need a constructor, so I'll let ReSharper generate that for me. Thank you, ReSharper. It's then going to tell me there's some things to override, and what it's saying is that you need to create your app. So I'm going to create my app. And it is a core, so I never actually linked to the core project. So hopefully if I do that, then ReSharper doesn't know about core develop. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to link. So add the reference again, and this is within my solution, so it's this portable class library, add it, done. hopefully that should now know where quarter is. Ah, it's because I didn't put new. You lot are rubbish at this pair programming. Help me out here. So new quarter map. And the reason that it needs the quarter is because I also have this app.xaml object on those. The other things I'd like to do here is just initialize those plugins. So what I'll do is I'll override a load plugins. And in here I will just call plugin manager.ensure plugin loaded. And I will pass in the types of those plugins that I want to make sure. Now this feels a bit fiddly and a bit clunky. I wish there was an easier way of doing it, but unfortunately there isn't, because there's no easy way to enumerate all of the files in the project at the moment. And that's just a Windows Store type thing at the moment. So hopefully we'll find a way around that soon, because we do like to just do things by magic and let the developers get on and write in business logic and that type of thing. So those are the plugins initialized. Hopefully this now builds. Does it build? Errorless, that doesn't look so bad. Good. Type of namespace, main page. Okay, so I can get rid of that in a minute. So it's telling me I delete the main page. So what I really want to do is in here, I want to get rid of that main page thing. And what I want to do is create a setup. New, and it's going to be a setup. And I'll pass in the root frame. I want to initialize that setup. I'd then like to get hold of the start object. So what I'm going to do is use this inversion of control that I'll talk a bit about to get hold of the start object. So var start equals. So MVX is the short name, again Smurf naming, for the inversion of control hub. And I'll resolve this IMVX app start, get hold of it, and then I'll just call start.start. So that's it. That project now is hopefully 100% ready to add some views to. So hopefully it now builds. Hopefully I didn't forget any steps. Right, so let's just add some views very quickly. And this, is turning a Windows Phone app into a Windows Store app. Right, so we're going to add a new page. So when we add a new page, we're going to add a basic page. Now, who knows about basic pages and how they work? When you add this first basic page in a Windows Store app, it adds that common folder. I guess you all know about it, the layout, where, and all that stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to make use of that. So when it adds home view, it says, do you want to add common? We go, yes. And what we do is we hack into common, and we take a look at layout and where page, and we go, we know all of our pages are going to inherit from this guy. So what we're going to do is actually just change it, so that instead of inheriting from the Windows default page, we're going to inherit from an NVX store page. Again, resharp and refine for us. And the other thing that I really quite hate about this template, but I can't persuade Tim Moyer to change, is that in here, it does some really naughty things, and it overrides all navigating too, and it never passes the message down to the base class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove their own navigator, because I don't like it. And actually, I'll just remove that one. I'll be the beat, I'll do what they should have done, do base on navigator. And the same thing with on navigated from. So we are losing their suspension manager, their tombstoning mechanism, but maybe we'll replace that with one of our own, so that's not too bad. So again, that's on navigated from E. So those two things are there now. And then back in the home view, this again is now inheriting the right thing, so we don't need to do anything else to this. But what we do need to do is edit the XAML. So in here, I hope, we can add, we can add the, where is our actual content? There's nothing in there. So let's add in a list box. So basically we want the same code that was in Windows Phone UI for the home view. So let's just find this guy. Home view.xaml. And you can see it's a list box. Unfortunately, XAML is not portable, but it is cut and pastable. So let's just cut and paste it. And I think the only thing I need to change is where this is going to be displayed, because I think this is going to go in grid row as well. So that hopefully should build, and let's just see if it does. And build succeeded. So I should be able to run this. Oops, I'm running the wrong one, that's not so good. It should be able to run this. Let me find out if this one builds or runs. So it's deploying, it's running, and if I'm very lucky, right, so there is my content, but I've styled it very badly. But hopefully you can see that we have got the view model, the outer Windows phone. Yeah, it's just that it's on white on white background. Who's a Windows Store expert? You can tell me how to start this in 2 lines? Oh, surely there's somebody out there. Right, so I'll just set the background to... Right, so hopefully now that should run. But what we will discover is if I then actually click on one of these guys... Oh, no, it's still not there. If I click on one of these guys, so, you know, to go to the... Oh, this is a great term, white and white. Go to the colours, nothing happens. And the reason nothing's happened is because you don't have a colour view. So let's again quickly add that. This wasn't where I was going with this demo, but it's cool. Because this is basically the same process you're going to go through with iPhone. It's basically the same process you're going to go with Android. And perhaps one day soon it's going to be the same process you go through with Mac Desktop. So let's add in a new item, and this time it's going to be another basic page, which is the colours view. So we've added in the colours view. And again, we don't need to change anything in the code behind because it's already going to inherit from that layout page, which means it inherits from something. It's got a Smurf name. And so what we're going to do is just edit this guy. I'm going to close the example design because I don't know how it works. And look at the text. And again, what we can do is we can steal it from the Windows Phone. So the Windows Phone looked like this, and it had a stack panel. And in the stack panel, it just had these guys. So we should be able to do stack panel, and hopefully the colours will work nicer for us. If not, we're going to have to learn how to do it, which is good. So hopefully, if we run this up now, then we should see, I think actually there's one problem here at the moment, which is that we've got this native colour. We haven't actually declared the value converter for this. So let me just start with, comment that. No, let me just add it in, because you may as well see how value converters work in Windows Store. So basically, the problem with value converters is that for whatever reason, Microsoft decided that they didn't want to make them portable. So as you probably already know, value converters in Windows Store have a different interface to the value converter that was used in WPF and Silverlight 2 and Silverlight 3 and Silverlight 4 and Silverlight 5 in Windows Phone. So they do have to have a different interface, so we can't use them portably. So what we have to do is we have to wrap them. And so what we do is we just create a folder called native converters. And in that native converters, we just add a class. And we'll remove that class. And instead of doing that, what we'll do is we'll just wrap it. So what we do is we create a native NVX. What do we want to call it? We want to call it a native color, because that's what we're using here. And we're going to inherit from MVX native color, native value converter. It's a bit fiddly, but you get the hang of it. And ReSharper will get that for us. And inside that, we're going to put a MVX native color value converter. If this had been a different example, and it hadn't been one of the stock ones, right. And that's it. So that now is available, the native color. And so now we can copy it into app.xaml, into our resource dictionary. And let's just put it in there. So we want the native color, and we want to call x:key equals native color. And what that means is that should now be registered for us. So that's not so conventional. That's a bit of cut and paste. It's a bit hideous, but there's no way around that for Windows Store app at the moment. So let's just put that in, and hopefully it now builds. And now when we run it, we'll get the same white screen. But if I can find colors there, when we run it, hopefully we should have the same UI up and running within Windows Store. So you know that is reuse of your things, completely impossible. So that's what you know and love already. You know that's kind of cute, but really you want to move on beyond that. So let's take a look at Android. And Android, we've got the same project here. You won't be familiar with this. Let me just change this class now, because this is pretty horrible. It's not actually got an activity in it, it's got a setup class now. So the Android project, not while I'm being debugged, sorry. Oh, this is upsetting. Right, anyway, so it's renamed things, I hope. So what does the Android project look like? So it looks a bit like all the other UI projects you've already seen. Yeah, hopefully, you know, it's pretty empty. Importantly, it's got a setup.cs in it. It's got a splash screen, and it's got a views folder. Everything else that's in here on the right, like these resources and these assets, these are just text files or image files to some degree. There's nothing in there that you wouldn't normally see in a resources folder or an assets folder within a Windows Phone or Windows Store project. So if you take a look through, there is one generated file, which is this guy. Don't ever think about editing it because it will get generated again. And this basically is just a whole load of lookup numbers for the resources. So, you know, if you ever used to use C++ and all those kind of things, it's similar in terms of resource pages. So let's take a look at setup. Let me just first let's take a look at what it references. Again, it references a huge chunk of libraries. So it's got the cross-core, which is the core hub of things, and it's got the MVVM. It's got a couple of new ones you haven't seen before. These binding ones that you've got up here are because Android itself doesn't have binding labels. Yeah, so it doesn't have the XAML type data binding and those lovely dependency properties. So we've written them and we've added them in. It's then got some plugins. So again, it's got plugins for color, for JSON and visibility. I think you saw that in Windows Phone. You didn't need it in Windows Store, you'll notice. You didn't have JSON in Windows Store. But that's because it does its navigation differently. But everything else there is pretty much the same. And at the bottom, hopefully, of the screen, you can see that it does have valueconversion.core, which is our core shared project. So that's what it looks like in references. If you look at setup, it's exactly what you'd expect from seeing before. It's got a constructor which takes some hideous objects, which is an Android thing. It's got a method that you have to override, which creates a new app, which is the thing in your core project. It's then got a create navigation serializer, and then it's got some mechanisms to get hold of these value converters from the colors and from the visibility. And then it's got load plugins. And so it's pretty similar to what you've already seen. It is a bit of boilerplate code, it is a little bit of overhead, but it's kind of nice to have somewhere you know is always going to be created on startup, and it's always going to be on startup path, no matter how you can mix around. So if there is anything you need to set up, if there is a database you need to check for in the UI side, you can do it here. If there is something you need to check for in the application side, in the class, you can do it now. Because you always know that your path into the app is going to be the same way. And then if we take a look at the views, then at the moment this guy's only got home view. That's a lie, it's got several things. So it's got two views in here at the moment. It's got home and colour. So let's just take a look at home first. So home, if you take a look at it, it's got one method in there. Yeah? It inherits from something Smurf-like. I hope people don't mind with Smurf. You're too young to remember Smurfs, I think that's it. I need a Belgian. An old Belgian. So it's got MVX activity. An activity is like a page. Yeah, so if you're coming from Windows Store, it's like a page. If you're coming from Windows Phone, it's like a page. It's an activity. And all it's doing is it's saying, please set my activity layout to something called View Home, and that's it. And if you take a look at our Colors view, then Colors view is here, and it's, again, it's just got please set. So let's take a look at these resources, let's find them. So it's called resources.layout.viewColors and View Home. So let's take a look at View Home first. It's the uglier of the two. It's the one you might not understand quite so easily. So I'm assuming that most people here don't know much about Android. I think that's correct. So there might be a few Android heads nodding. So Android hasn't got XAML, it's got AX. Yeah, so it's a nice little twist on it. It has similar structures. So it has layout things, so things like grid, it has a grid view. Things like stack panel, it has something called a linear layout. And a linear layout is what you can see here. It's pretty much identical to a stack panel, except, and this is something that Windows developers love, its default orientation is horizontal. So the number of times that you, and the other thing is that you normally specify, as you can see here, layout width to be fill parent. And so the number of times you create a linear layout, and then you call fill parent its first child, and you can't find the rest. You're sure it's still wrong in the binding library, or you're sure it's still wrong in viewport, or you're sure the database is deleted out of the data. It's not, it's just drawn off to the right of the screen. Yeah? So always remember this line about Android orientation equals. No matter whether it's horizontal or vertical, just always add it in there. And you can see that for some reason here we filled our stack panel, our linear layout, with a list view. And then you can also see there's one special line here that isn't a normal Android file, which is this second one, which is just an include. So it's just like a XAML include. It's nothing particularly. And what that is actually saying is it's got schemas, Android core, APK res, and then the name of your project. So it's saying include it from local please. Yeah. And that's just so that you can add in these two local things here, which is saying that for my list view, and this is where we start to see data binding in action. If I just pull it up, actually, let me just So home view in one of the XAMLs look like this. So hopefully you can see, I wonder if I can undock this. This might be the end of the demo, the end of the world. So hopefully you can see here that in the XAML world, you have a list box, and you have item source bound to items. Yeah. And what you can see over in the XML world, in the Android XML, is you've got a MVX list view, so a Smurf list view. I say Smurf every time I say MVX now. So you've got an MVX list view, and here at the bottom we've got bind information saying item source for this list view. Please point it to items. So you can see how it corresponds across. I hope this is big enough for all of you to see. And then in here at the moment, inside the XAML, we've got a data template. Well, we don't have the data template, but what we do have is we have an MVX item template saying, please look at this. So if we then find out what that is, so we go over to here and look at it, then you will see that we have an item template. And inside the item template, it's saying, please use a linear layout, so things that panel. And inside that linear layout, it's saying, please put a button. And then we've got a bind instruction that's saying for the text of that button. I hope this is big enough. If not, you shouldn't have sat so far back. So inside that, we've got it saying, please set the text of that button to name. And please, when that button gets clicked, call the show command. Yeah? So it's really similar to what you've got over here in terms of a button. It's subtly different. It's a bit of a mind thing when you go from one to the other, and you'll find you use the wrong names in the wrong places, and you spend half your day sobbing because it's just a random XML error. But it's pretty familiar to all users. So that's what it looks like. Let's quickly look at color view as well. So the color view for this looks like this. So instead of a progress, what was it, a slider in the XAML world? So again, I'll try and float this thing. I bet I can never dock my desktop after this talk ever again. So here we have a set of sliders inside a stack panel. Here we've got a linear layout with a set of seed bars. And we found the progress of each of those to red, to green, to blue. And at the bottom we've got a text view, and we have bound its background color to color. And we've used a value converter. Yeah. Now, some magic that happens here is unlike in the Windows Store, Windows Phone, where we had to get in that resource dictionary. Here we've just guessed what the name of the value converter is by native color. And it's because we kind of know. Yeah? If it's got the Smurf on the front, we remove it. If it's got the value converter or converter on the end, we remove that. And then we use that as the name. So it's just convention, basically. So you'll see it time and again as we push this through. But now what I should be able to do is run out. Now I'm not going to use the Android emulator, because the Android emulator is the most powerful device known to man. It is a full Linux machine. It's wonderful. But one, it fights with the Windows Phone emulator, and two, it's very slow because it's so powerful. Yeah, so you can root into it and do all sorts of things, but it's too slow. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to demo it. Oops, probably deleted. I'm going to demo it on a tablet, which is the Nexus 10. So you may all need to just believe me that it works. I might have to increase some sizes or something so you can see this. So it's deploying at the moment. Hopefully you saw that, and it should run. I think I might have. There's an option in Xamarin.Android to do fast deployment. I may have that turned on, and paradoxically that seems to make it slower for me. Right, so hopefully none of you guys can see this. When it starts up, look at this, it's front row, it says you're right there. If you'll go mild picture in this talk, then you can sue Microsoft. So hopefully, it's getting very loud, you can see that it's got 5 items. If you hit colours, and hopefully you can see it's got sliders across there. I could make this UI nicer, but hopefully you can see that if I change those sliders, then we get the same colour binding that you're used to. Yeah. So that's your same view model being used. If you wanted to put logic in there, you could do it and push it across. But that's your basic project, up and running with value converters, data binding, two-way data binding. And one thing you may have noticed as well in differences is that actually here, when I was doing the data binding for XAML, I don't have to go back to that window for XAML anymore. Where are you? So when you did the data binding for XAML, you'll notice I always had to specify two-way. And I guarantee there are people in this room who've spent hours wondering why their projects didn't work because they forgot to put mode equals two-way. By default, the MVVM cross data binding uses two-way. People may hate it. You can always, if you want to, type, comma mode equals one-way, and that turns off the two-way. But by default, I've used two-way because it always is something that I forget personally. So that's how it works on there. While we're continuing this tour, shall we see it working on iPhone as well, see how that's put together? Right, so let me get this right. Hopefully it's... I need to turn my Mac back on. Ooh. No. This all works so well earlier. Because this has come on now. Now what you can do in the world of new Xamarin, so the latest tools that have come from the Mono team have become part of Novell and then became part of Attachment and are now part of their own stuff, is you can deploy from the PC onto a Magic build server on the Mac and then it'll just run. However, that doesn't work at the moment for the class libraries. Hopefully it is working somewhere in a secret office somewhere in San Francisco right now, but I don't have that code, so it's not unfortunately available right today. So what we have to do at the moment is we have to just build separately on the Mac. It is a bit of a chore, but it's not that big a chore compared to writing everything in Objective-C. You will hear lots of people complaining about Objective-C. Objective-C is actually beautiful in its own way. I've heard that said about lots of babies, so it must be true. But yeah, it's just a different language. So it's kind of nice that it's got various constructs. It's not writing everything once in the same language and reusing it. So if I can actually find my mouse. Right. So this may be a bit smaller resolution. So over here what we have, somebody who knows Max might know how to zoom in on these things. Is we've got the same multiple class library.
Or control and scroll.
Control and scroll. No. We've got the same class library, so I'm just going to have to make you believe it. It's the same app.cs. It does look like I might have edited one file, so apologies for that. But you can see it's the same sort of thing. So this guy should scroll. No? Anyway, so this guy is the same code, and it's the same multiple class library. But what we've added onto it is a UI touch. Do a mirroring screen here. And in the UI touch, you will see that we've got a home view. And in here, we don't have any terminal type thing or any XML at the moment. And my scroll wheel's not working at all, which might explain why it's doing the zooms. And in the scroll view, in the home view, we have a little bit of text. So what we're actually saying here is that instead of doing it from an NVX activity or normal type guy, what we are actually inheriting from here is an NVX table view controller. So what it's saying is it's kind of a whole page list by default, or default for the home. And what we set up here is we've just set up a standard one, so that's going to use the default templates. And we're just going to bind the name and the show command. So it's a bit different, iOS, and I think you'll find that quite often, it is a bit different. Now what I've actually done here is I've managed to delete my existing views, so I'm going to add one. And what we're going to add, I should probably point out, we also have a setup here. Yeah. And the setup is an MVX touch setup. And inside this touch setup, you see there is a creation of a new app, there is a constructor which takes some horrible arguments, and there is, at the bottom here, our value converters and our plugins initialized. But that's it, it's basically the same type of thing set up. But what we need to do now is just to add another view. So I'm going to add a color view. And what you have to do is you have to find a color view, so that's fine. We're going to add an iPhone view controller. And again, we're going to use naming conventions, so we're going to add colors view. Contact, wrong, sorry. I can't sit over there, so I can't just see it. Colors view. And you can see that it looks like this by default, so it's not very, it hasn't got much in there. But what we want to do is we want to replace that UI view controller. Think of page, think of activity, think of the UI view controller, and you're in pretty much the same place. And we want to replace it with a Smurf. So we do a MVX view controller. And obviously, we don't have resharpen, we do have their own version. And so if you hit Alt and Enter, you can pull it. And somebody in the audience has a cheat sheet for these shortcuts if you need to use it. This is Mono Develop, also known as Xamarin Studio now. For those of you who are familiar, it's kind of an open source version of Visual Studio. It's Xamarin's own version of Visual Studio. I'm going to change that wording now as it becomes Xamarin Studio. And that's now changed it over. So what we want to do is we want to add some content to this guy. So this class came with a couple of hang-ons. So it came with a design class, which again you don't really want to touch yourself. And it came with, it's got some defaults in there. And it came with a zib. So a zib is the iPhone equivalent of XAML, and it's horrible syntax, it's horrible XML, so you don't really want to use edit the zib yourself. But we should, unless I have really messed up by deleting it, we should be able to open that. Apologies, before this demo I deleted what was there, so I may have broken the demo forever. So no, it's opened eventually. It's opened on the other desktop, that's why I can't see it. Multiple desktops, I'm not allowed to use these things. Anyone know when I'm see? Not that way. Right, so it's opened up in something called Xcode, which is Apple's development tool. This has been described as like developing in the Stone Age. It's not that bad. It's just it's not Visual Studio, it's not home to you guys, it's not Xamarin Studio. It does have some little foibles when you're developing this, but it's got a reasonable editor, so what you can do is you can drag over a label if you want to. You can drag over a slider, so a slider is a UI slider, is it? A slider. So you can drag those over, you can lay them out, you can do all sorts of interesting things if you want to, and you can, we need to create 3 of these, I believe. Yeah, and it's quite cute for laying out, it's quite nice that way. And we will also just create a text view, I guess. Let's create a UI view. So I'm just going to create a view at the bottom here. So this should look like the user interface you're used to, yeah? And we're going to set these so that they have a maximum of 255. I should have done this before I made copies of them, obviously. And we'll create this one to 255 as well. So those are our views that we really want to do. We now want to link those to code behind. So what I need to do, this isn't going to work so well on 2 windows, sorry, is I need to create something, show something called the assistant editor. So what I'm doing is showing it over here. And when I've created that, then you'll see you get this kind of code at the bottom that says, oh look, I've got a colours view. I can't scroll to make that larger, apologies. And what you can do then is you can right-click on these guys, so any of these you can do, or you can right-click over here and do it, or there's a tab up here where you can do it. And what you do is you find something called New Referencing Outlet, and you drag it down there, and you go, well, this is our red slider. Right, whatever I've just called it, that's what it's named to me. And this is going to be our green slider. I'm not colourblind. A number of times I get the order of these guys wrong. It's quite annoying. And the last one is going to be our blue slider. So you can see it doesn't take long to give a name to these guys. And then this one is going to be this. Oh, wait a minute. And then this one here is going to be our output view or something. And so what we've created in this stage is we've created a simple UI, so a label at the top, so 3 sliders, there you go from 0 to 255, and we've got a colour area at the bottom. So hopefully we should now be able to save this, so Control S to save. And let me close it, close without any issues. And what should happen over here now is we go to the designer view, and if we are lucky, then Xamarin Mobile, Xamarin Studio will notice that it's changed. Open it up again. And what Xamarin will do in the background is it will take a look at that zip that was generated, and it should, I have upset it by deleting these files because there was a couple of copies, and it should notice that those files have changed, or it's done. No, okay. Unfortunately, it deleted those and didn't save them when I hit save. As I said, it's like developing in the Stone Age. Let me do it very quickly again, and this time I will be more careful to save. So I'm only going to do 1 slider, and you'll have to believe me that it's done. Where is this guy gone? It's my blue piece now. So I'm just going to have 1 slider. And this slider here is going to go here. And we're going to set it to go across the screen. It does do UI quite nice in terms of styling and positioning. And we're going to say that please go to 255. And then we are going to have 1 view. So we want a UI view. And this view is going to go onto here. And what we're just going to do is we're not going to worry about the other sliders or anything else. We're going to show the assistant editor, which I should know the keyboard shortcut for, but I don't. And so we go View, Assistant Editor, Show Assistant Editor. Why is that not actually highlighted? I might have to give up something for this demo. Okay, I may have to give up, which is a shame because this is quite a nice demo really. Right, show View, Assistant Editor, Show Assistant Editor. Thank you. So let me just drag this down. So we right click on here, we go New Referencing Outlet, and we go Red Slider. Maybe it was upset because I did a typo last time, I just wasn't happy about it. And then we go here, we right click, and we do a New Referencing Outlet. An outlet is just like a link, if you like, or some sort of place where the code can talk to. And this is going to be our output view. Right, so we've got those guys. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across to the desktop you can't see. I'm going to choose File, Save. And hopefully this time it will actually save it. And then I will switch back here to the Xamarin Studio. And this time, Xamarin Studio will magically pick up, and you will notice that in our C# we now have an output view, and we have a red slider. Yeah? So that's what normally happens, and normally you can go through that cycle and go around and put things in. So now in our code, we need to do the binding for that. And to do the binding, brand new at the moment, we use fluent binding to do it. So what we basically do is we do this dot create binding. And again, we don't have resharper, but hopefully it should have out enter, and it should give us using that to do it. And what we'd like to bind is we'd like to bind that red slider. And what we'd like to bind it to is we'd like to bind it to a colors view model. Yeah. So it's giving us something to go on. And again, we can do an alt enter to say where that colors view model comes from. And what we'd like to get it a little bit more. Hopefully it's given us that. And what we'd like to do is on that view model, we would like to bind to the vm.red. Yeah, and then we'll just apply that. So that's the binding for that. And then the other thing we wanted to bind was we wanted to bind the output window, or the output. And on that, we'd like to bind its background color property. So what we're going to bind is we're going to bind the apologies for the size of it, but again, you chose to sit with that. So we're going to bind the views background color, top to background. It's not as bad again when we're looking at the screen, looks like one. And then we're going to bind that to, again, it's in the home view model. Oops. And we'd like to bind it to the view models. And this time it's the color on the view model. Oh, it's not a home view model, it's colors view model. Again, you guys are not very good at this, extreme programming. So this is the colors we're going to bind it to. And the other thing we want to do is this conversion. So again, it's like a value converter. Right, so it's with conversion, and we just want to pass in the name of the converter to use. You could pass in the instance if you wanted to. And so the instance of the name of this is native color. And again, we just need to make sure we apply it. So that now does our binding, and what we should see if we run this guy up.
Probably don't want that You probably don't want that in the receive memory one.
Is it in receive memory? I can give you that. Okay, thank you. So basically, we don't need it in where Nick just pointed out in there. We'll get rid of that method. What we need is the kind of initialization method of the view load. And when we run this up now, hopefully, start debugging, should run up, should build, and it should go over to here. It will run up our app in the simulator. So the only thing we've got, this is the home view, that thing with that table. You've seen all the code for that. We hit colors, we go across to here. If we move the slider, it changes. We had 3 sliders for hand, that's not the same. We'll do it. So what you've hopefully seen by this point, around the houses a little bit, is you've seen one model class library used on 4 platforms coded pretty much live. There is some stuff to learn, but in terms of sharing your business logic, it's there. If you wanted to do very simple things in your view model site, if you wanted to get hold of a view model, and you want to say the colors view model, for example here, let's say that we want to limit the value on the red. Yeah. So let's take the limit here and let's add a limit method, and we will add a private void limit. So it's an int limit, and it takes an int in. And so if the value is, oops, so it's just a simple, bit of business logic on here. If value is less than 50, then value, then return 50. Otherwise, return value. Yeah, so all we're doing here is saying that red has to be above a certain level. Let's do it as a hungry version, just so you can see something on the screen. Then if you run this up, and what we should see when you run it up, well, let's stop it first. Stop it, and run it again. When you run it up, what you should see is the three magic two-way binding. What you should see is that now we cannot go any further to the left. And that logic will be propagated across all of your business. So, if it had been a wet hit or something that you read in the important class library, you'd have that automatically on your code and managed for you. Right, so that was a slightly longer demo session than I planned for starters. But hopefully you've got a few of the ideas about things that we do. And hopefully back here we can return to the slides. Hopefully that's the end of that first what we'll cover. That's the demo, first cross-platform app. Just some of the key goals we had in the framework. Portable class libraries I've talked about. What they enable you to do is this sort of thing, and this is genuine. This is what we did last year to go from a Twitter search app. We went from all of these different platforms to this, and we had all of these shared things going on. It simplifies your life so much. When you do resharp or renaming, it propagates across your whole tree. When you introduce new things, it propagates. When you write test harnesses on your core project, it means you tested once and it should work everywhere. It gives you a good reliability. You can do it by file linking. A lot of people push file linking. I'm not going to talk anymore. Inversion of control is impossible to talk about. But basically, inversion of control, you saw it a little bit with some mdx.resolves and some mdx.registers. What it basically means is, when you're writing your code, think about interfaces first. So if you have a view model that relies on something like a location service, don't give it a location service, give it an interface to a location service. And that means that when you move to Android, you can give it an Android implementation rather than having to do some horrible, tsunami, or I'll give up on it. So basically IOC is about using interfaces. It's about then choosing what implements those interfaces at runtime on each platform. And that's it, yeah. It is a short phrase, IOC is there. Just MVX kind of makes it easier for you to do this, because it kind of pushes you there. And then some of the other MVVM frameworks, they can leave it open for you. Once you start thinking cross-platform, even Windows Phone and Windows Store, you really need to think about making sure you're using interfaces everywhere. MVC is not part of MVC, but I thought I'd explain it anyway. So MVC is all about model. These pictures are stolen from Jeremy Lakeness. And then it's about view, and then it's about controller. Yeah? So MVC you'll hear about on various platforms. And basically, your controller and your view really get to know each other very intimately. And you'll quite often see all sorts of code in your controller about, it's referencing this part of the view and it knows about this variable. And if you then add another thing that's bound to the same thing, you have to add. Anyway, so that's what MVC is all about. And really replacing that with model view model. You still get your models, that's all in your back-end logic, everything that sits behind you in the core. You then also still get your view, but what you kind of get in the view model is you get a computer-friendly, C#-friendly representation of that view. And really, you simplify it down to a set of properties. So, there is a hill, there is a list of fields, there is a list of trees, and you can go for a walk through these lovely fields and trees. And then what you get on top of that is this thing called the data binder. And it just makes sure that everything is tied together. And yes, I am entering a competition for the worst possible explanation that we can, so please vote for me. But that's it. That's exactly what is really going on in MVVM. although my models are never that trained. So, cock. Cock is obviously convention over configuration. You've already seen it, yeah? So you saw that on Android and iOS, on iPhone, you didn't specify your value converters. It just worked out which value converters you want. There are times where you want to specify them. Perhaps you've got a value converter that you can configure in various ways. But by general, you just kind of put them in there and it knows about them. Yeah? There is a little bit of a price in startups pay for that because there is reflection going on. It's looking through all your classes trying to find them. So, if your gap gets huge, you might want to reconsider how to change that. But by default, it works lovely for small apps and it works lovely for quite large. So this is the obvious example. If you've got all of these home view models, then MVVM and Crosstor works out that those two things talk to each other. Yeah, so you put these there, you put view models there. Please don't make me configure them in any other way. Just work it out yourself. Oh, this is a nice one. T. So anyone know what that stands for? No, not even I do. So what basically another underlying principle of everything you do is that you can override everything. And the important thing is that your app is the king, is the king, is the king. Yeah, so whenever you come across something and you think, oh, how do I do that in MVVM? Oh, it's really hard. I'll put in a value converter and I'll talk to this and I'll put in a message and the message can do it. If there is a hacky way and it works for your app, then you are perfectly allowed to do it. Yeah. If it makes sense in your situation to put these things in, then do it. If there is something that you do not like about the framework you are using, MVVM Cross or whatever, do it. Yeah. This is not about learning a framework. It's not about anything else. It's about shipping your app. Yeah, so make sure you ship, because if you don't ship, it doesn't matter what else you do. So ship something that users love, that you love, and the app is the king, is the king, is the king. And if not, cock. Right. So what have we not talked about? So how are we doing time-wise?
Doing fine.
Are we?
Yeah.
How long have we taken? If anybody wants to drink or anything, it's been an hour already. Okay, I'm going to have to go quickly through some other things. So, what didn't we talk about? Navigation between view models. Let me pull up a different project, and I will very quickly discover that my mouse is on the wrong. So, at the moment, all of the projects you've seen have kind of been whole screen for navigation. So you saw that, the whole page changed when you did from the list to the colours, for example. That isn't the only way of doing things, so particularly when you're on Windows Store or an iPad, you might want different areas of the screen to show different things in a kind of prism bridge-y type way. You can do that. There's something in the framework called a presenter that chooses how to do it. But for now, what I'm going to do is just show you kind of the simple ways to navigate between view models. So that's assuming you've got a page model. So what we've got in this project is we've got the same sort of thing, a navigation core which has got an app and some view models, that's it, and it references the libraries. In the main view model, which is what's on screen here, we have a simple command, which just does a simple navigation. So when you get to the simple command and it gets called, it says, please show a view model, please show the simple view model. And then we've got a parameterize command, and what that does is it passes in a parameters object. And so what happens is that parameters object will actually get put through whatever mechanism it is. So on Windows Phone, it will be put through a XAML URI. On Windows Store, it will be put through one of those navigate XAML structures. On Android, it will be put through a JSON mechanism by default, through a intent, which is what it's called on Android. And on iOS, it will be put through as a code structure, actually, just in showing a new view control. And when it comes to doing a .NET version and being on an Apple desktop, it will be a similar thing again. And then a second way of navigating at the bottom, the same sort of thing, is actually just showing the view model that passes in an anonymous object. But you can do any of those, and then on the receiving end, what happens is you will get called in an init method, and in that init method, you will get a magic structure that's been given to you. So if you ever need to go from like a list down to a detail, you can do it using this type of mechanism. And if you don't know this type of mechanism, you can replace it. So I can show you that quickly running on Windows Phone, because that's the one that's up and running quickest to show you. And you will see that hopefully it's been written this code. So hopefully it will come up. No, hang on, let me just fix a bug from something I changed. Teach me to switch to a different project. Run long time. What you can do is you can pull in that Hopefully the emulator's up and running. And so if you want to do a simple navigation, you can do a simple and it goes to just a simple view. If you want to put in some values and then when you go to parameter view, that parameter gets passed to the other page. Similarly, you can do it via an anonymous method. Yeah, and all of those things are available to you. By far the best way is to use one of those parameter objects when you start getting sophisticated. So that's page navigation. Lists and tables, well, you saw a bit of that. I haven't got time to talk about it now because I've overrun. But basically, it's the same sort of thing as you get in Windows Store. You can put a template together. I could show you actually. I'll overrun. I won't be able to overrun in Texas, but I can overrun here. So if I show you in this guy, over in Mac, as long as I've got the network, there's a cube demo. Recent solutions. I don't think this is the right one. So what I've got here is actually I've got a project, and in that project I've put the core code, which is what you normally see in a portal class library, so it's got the app, and I put that inside the, just for simplicity at the moment. And in here I've got some services, which are give me animals, and some models, which give me dogs and kittens. And I've then got my view models, and my view models is a pet shop view model, which has an observable collection in it. So you all know what observable collection is. It's a collection where you can add and remove things. And I've then got an animal view model, which allows me to do various things. On the UI side, as well as having the pet shop view, which has just got a table at the bottom, I've got these cells. And these cells, again, you can see in the designer. Oops, let's open up over here. Drag it back. So the cells look pretty much like you'd expect. You know, there's a little dog or a kitten that you can display. And when we run that up, what you'll see very quickly is shoot, builds and runs. Oh, I've written some little bugs by it. No, like that. Okay, so this is one of the fluent binding changes I made. So as you remember, this syntax story, as I say, this won't happen in something else that's totally different happening. Evolve. So let's do, let's bind this guy to here, and then the one thing we need to do is to apply it. So again, all we're doing here is just setting up a binding for our table. I forgot to edit this, hopefully. Okay, no, I've unfortunately heard. Oh, it's 4, it's 2 it's supposed to be. Yeah, apologies. Should have these demos ready to run. Right, so hopefully that runs up, and hopefully we then, when we come over to here, we can add our animals. When you choose to add a dog, it adds a dog type cell. And when you choose to add a kitten, it adds a kitten type cell. Within these things, you can delete them, and you can add, oh, come on, kittens. And you can change the price of the kittens. Why is it coming back? And, okay, so eventually we get the images back. So you can see, you know, it's possible to do polymorphic lists just like you do in anything else. You'll also notice that you get animations for free. So when, you know, this is the entire table code that you can see here. And the little bit that is interesting is that there's an animation saying when it adds, please row animate from the top. When it removes, row animate from the middle. So hopefully when we go back to our here, so when it removes, it does that, and when it adds, it's going to do it from the top. So you know, you get those animations for free, and that's all driven off of the observable collection in our notify collection change. So lists are pretty straightforward, but each time it's always good to go back and look at a sample to run that out. So we then have value converters. I think you've seen far too much of those. There's a little hero break, which I probably won't get time to do. These aren't my heroes. Young White State here in the UK. These are 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 14-year-olds. If you ever get a chance to watch their videos, they are very much heroes. The other thing that's fascinating about young White State, particularly looking around this room, is they are 70% female. So young hackers are 70% female. We are doing something wrong as a profession. I kind of knew that when I started 20 years ago, but I kind of assumed it would change. Yeah, so it needs to change because we're losing them. And it's purely selfish. I just wanted to work with best hackers. I'm not going to demo any more plugins because I think we've overrun by quite a lot. Apologies for that. But basically, if you want to plug anything in, there are plugins available. If there aren't plugins available, then you can add them. Yeah, so a plugin is just kind of a wrapper around IOC. So when you see a plugin, it's kind of a core library project that contains interfaces, and then it's implementation of those. And it's just done in a standard way each time so that you can drag them in. And I'll show you that briefly in my last demos. I won't demo SQLite.net again, but again, plugins can be done for that. So basically, you can define a central SQLite in your core library, and that SQL will be used across everything. And then I can demo Sphero. So Sphero is a project that I did last year, and this is still running on an old version of MVVM across. And I presume everybody doesn't know what Sphero is. Gosh, I'm beaten into silence. So Sphero is a robot. And what Sphero is, it's just a robot that's quite a lot of technology inside it. And you can see the project structure here for Sphero. Let me just close this down a bit. But what Sphero talks is Bluetooth. And basically, hopefully you can see this from the side. We've got all sorts of things in here which are cross-platform. So we've got an accelerometer, we've got some speech control, we've got settings to access, which are all going to be cross-platform. We've got Sphero itself, which is a Bluetooth device. We've got some photo taking. And then at the bottom, we've got UIs. So this is kind of an example of what a bigger project looks like. You still have this, portable library that hopefully looks kind of familiar to you. It's got an app, it's got a few exception objects and some helpers, it's got some view models and some services and some interfaces and things. But if you take a look at anything that actually talks, to Sphero, then, hopefully, there's a game now style view model. Hopefully you'll notice that, it's always using interfaces to access it. All this code is shared across all the platforms, and it enables you to connect to the sky and zoom in around the floor from any of the platforms. Gosh, I am such a gas bag. Never going to fit inside it now. So hopefully you can see, this is the only one that's actually shipped to a store, but hopefully it's there. And I hope I can connect to it. I think it might be talking on my iPad, so I'll have to do this demo afterwards. Apologies for that, but we will see how that comes on. But basically, you can connect from various devices, and you can control them. And it's all done, even though it's Bluetooth, which is about as native as you can get. It's like an NFC level type thing, really. You can do it. You can share the code. So the Bluetooth code on here is all here, and you can see that in the core for the Bluetooth. Are this many classes, so there's all these commands that go in there, these helpers. And the platform specific is just this. So there is some hack file sharing goes on. There's a little bit of Bluetooth specific, but most of it is up here in the shared code. And it's all shared interface. So when you add another command, it's added across all platforms simultaneously. Gas bag. Real world, I'm going to have to be very quick on. If anyone needs a nature break, please take it. Apologies for overrunning. So this project started about 18 months ago, and it started on Connect Star Wars, project for Xbox, and this was the app. So basically, it was a Twitter app and a Facebook app, and it just had this sideways scrolling. I had an awful lot else with the device operating. But this was what we put together, and to do it across all the platforms, we knew it had to be native, so you can forget your phone cache like things. And we knew it had to be a delightful experience, so we put it in there as this mono-touch, mono-droid, and Windows Phone. That's enough of the video. Sorry, it's better music. There is some better music coming. This is a project from, now it's being videoed, Bruel and Pitching, who are a Danish company, big industrials, and they do a lot of environmental monitoring. And what they had is they've got a Silverlight app, so this is Silverlight in the browser, and it connects real time to your sensors. So if you're running a motorway network and you want to know how loud your motorways are, you're running an airport and you need environmental concerns, this connects to them. There's a huge amount of big data behind it. You can see you can get noise samples from various bits of the day. They can analyze that data and pull it out. But what they needed was people needed to see this data on their phones. So they took their Silverlight app, Nothing to do with me, this is particularly as a former mine called Cheese Baron behind a lot of this tech. He's a student really, still, but he works with these guys as well as doing his studies. And he took the code and he ported it, MVVM style across all these things. There is a little bit of code behind in some of this map binding, but that's not that unusual for Windows Phone and Silverlight either. So it's not pure XAML-based binding for some of this. But you can see how it's not just about text fields on the screen. There's charting here, there is map animations here. It's quite an entertaining and rich environment. The next one is CentraStage, who are based in Amersham here, but also in South Africa. And they do monitoring for people like schools for their computers that are deployed. And these guys have an existing Windows format, and they ported it to MVVM for iPhones, you can see here. And this enables you to connect in. It doesn't quite, at the moment, I don't think, have the full virtual desktop in, but you can connect into the console. You can edit your registries for your iPhones, for your users, which is obviously fun. There is a free version available for up to 5 computers, so if you need a way of monitoring your own computers, give it a look. And these guys really excitingly have also ported it across from the iPhone to MVVM across on the Mac desktop. We don't have an official version of Mac Desktop at the moment because Mac Desktop doesn't support portable class libraries and we refuse to do the file leaking because it's coming anyway. So, this is the same code running. It's all the same logic, and there's loads of logic here to connect to their server securely, to get all this information back and to display it. The last one is Aviva here in the UK, and Aviva did an app. Well, I don't know how to explain. Music on this is even better.
Welcome to the Aviva Driver app, the new and easy-to-use app where safe drivers can save up to 20% on the car insurance.
Do you drive
safely?
Do you drive safely?
On a smartphone, pay more than £200 for your car insurance. If you answered yes to all three, then the Aviva Drive app will be right up your street. You can download our app from either Google Play or iTunes
Anyone
App
have
Store
that
to
music?
your smartphone. So how does it work?
So
The Aviva Drive app takes a snapshot of your driving style, which is built up from braking, accelerating and cornering over the course of 200 miles. You don't have to drive the 200 miles in one go.
right,
You can
that's
choose
enough.
which journey
So
you want.
basically, it's Android and iPhone only. It's got no Windows in it at the moment. It does GPS location stuff, so again, it uses the plugins for that. It needs to monitor quite continually how you're driving, and there's some sophisticated algorithms in there about how it's doing that, how it's collecting the data. It doesn't collect all 200 miles, because that would be quite big in terms of data, but it does kind of do that on the fly. It then needs to connect to Aviva's server. Because the actuaries have run risk plans on this, because it is actually costing them money, they needed to test it and make sure that code really ran. There is nobody safer in the world in terms of care testing than the insurers. So that's where, in the enterprise, this type of approach really pays off. Because if they've written it once in Java and they've written it in Objective-C, then keeping those two things in sync would have been hideous. If they've written it in file sharing or mechanisms again, it would have been hard. So they've done this this way, and it's better. Enough. There is a top secret app that I cannot talk about, but again, it's a beautiful app. It is coming out soon. It's supposed to be out this Monday, but the sponsors have changed the way they might display. So it'll be out in the next week or two, I hope. It's done by a UK company called Sequence, for those of you who know in Cardiff. It's got UIs for Windows 8, for Windows Phone. It's got separate UIs for UI Droid tablet and desktop and phone. It's got separate UIs for iPad and iPhone. It is really lovely, beautiful. It's got a really small core logic in terms of view models. Everything's driven through a web API on the server and through Ember code. There's a shared PCL for the DTOs, so there's shared code between the server and the UI. And what you really get here is you get that any of the devs can actually open any of the projects and just dev on them. Because it's shared code, it's C# from front end to back end. And in fact, there isn't even any sequence project because they use SQLite.net on the client and they use Entity Framework on the server. So, there's one language from start to end that's really very beautiful, and I wish I could show you that. The future, I'm going to have to go really quickly. The future is very hard to predict. We started, as I say, about 18 months ago. It's not that old, this project. The first thing was just about getting MVVM up and running on these platforms. Version 2, which I foolishly called vNext, and people still think, oh, is that the vNext and next coming next? Version 2, we added WinStore and we added WPF. The key change really was adding portable class libraries and these plugins. Version 3, which is what's happening at the moment, is really an attempt to clean up the API. So, we grew a bit organically to start with. So we've really flattened the number of namespaces so that people who haven't got ReSharper can code a lot quicker. You've seen how clean most of the views are in terms of code behind. There's very little that's in those views. We've cleaned up the way that you do the IOC, so it's a lot cleaner. And we are adding .Mac when it becomes available. The target is that that should be in beta today, and if I wasn't talking here, it probably wouldn't be. But really, the target is sometime this summer to actually just say, yeah, that's it, it can go out the door, it can be used really fully. I mean, there are people using it already, so it is usable, most of them, as you've seen. The future, obviously it's hard to predict, but really once we've got to this clean level, the stable level, we kind of like to look at what view models are and see if there's any different ways of doing them, particularly in an async world. View models have kind of been around since 2007, 2006. Haven't really changed much. Are there any alternatives to doing it by properties? Are there any alternatives to doing it by commands? Particularly in the async world. What happens when you bind to tasks? Binding, I think there's an awful lot more we can do in binding. Some of it is adding things that have been in WPF in the past, so things like multi-binding and stuff like that, a lot more validation code. But some of it is new. Some of it is things like in Knockout.js, they kind of got those computed observables, could we add those in? There is, we've got our own binding engine. There's no reason we have to stick to XAML anymore. Async, I mentioned, patterns. What things can sit on top of this? Are there common app structures you tend to see? Obviously, there are things like the messenger, the event subscriber type things. Also uses another idea, I won't demo that today, but basically, could you give a default view for each of your view models? So, if you've got something like those 3 sliders, could you describe that in code, or in JSON, or in XML, and have the UIs guess what it should look like? So you don't actually then have to do anything. And we have got that working to a first level on Android and iOS. It uses something called Dialog. Maybe that could be taken further. That hopefully is what we covered today. All of that, I ran over. It was a good lesson for me, so thank you for listening. Hopefully you've got an idea about how we try to ship, all right? The people who work with try to ship delightful and native apps, and hopefully you kind of see how we do it efficiently as we can. There are a few more heroes that I should have mentioned. These are the guys who've contributed this year to the project really in various ways. You'll see some of them are on there 2 or 3 times. The one who's pixelated, that was an MVP, so obviously not allowed to mention it. And there's one final hero. You've listened to me for just over an hour. This is Nicola. She's been up with me for 21 years. And that's it. So thank you very much for listening. I'm Stuart. I talk a lot. And we are going to do some longer sessions on this. There's one hopefully coming up in May, which is going to be a whole day. We're hoping to get some kind of bigger names for Windows over long. We know that MVVM. If you're interested in any way, then there's some addresses and things. Other than that, thank you very much for listening, and I'm like trying to get this ball up and running. Thank you.
Are we taking any questions? Stuart,
Questions, yes.
How do you share the code between your Mac and PC, just Dropbox or something like that?
So at the moment it's mainly for Git. As I say, there's a version of Xamarin now that plugs into Visual Studio, and you can actually run from Visual Studio onto the Mac and then just run it. So particularly if you are running a Mac single box with parallels on, and you actually almost feel like you're on the same desktop. But mainly it's Git as source control. You can do it using Dropbox as well if you want to, but longer term you have to use source control, otherwise you will drive yourself insane. So that's where that comes from. So yeah, you can use Dropbox if you want to.
Can you use async await in core?
So async await. You can use async await in the core if you want to now. You are only targeting Windows Phone and Windows RT, Windows Store. There is currently an alpha version, and it is very alpha, of async and await for iOS and for Android. So at the moment I wouldn't recommend using it unless you like pain. Because it's an alpha code, so it's what alphas are there for. But very soon, yes, you can.
Is that Windows Phone 7 and Windows Phone 8?
So I think there is a thing called the BCL async package on NuGet. And what that does is it adds in a async bridge and allows you to use it on Windows Phone 7.5 and above. Or Windows Phone 7.1/7.5 and above, whatever you particularly want to call it this week. And yes, you can use it then. And there are an increasing number of PCL packages for things like HTTP that allow you to do that as well. So yes, not at the moment, then is probably the best answer to give you that. But soon.
But for Windows Phone 8 and Windows Store, that's still okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically, at the moment, the MVVM cross is kind of agnostic to it in the same way like MVVM Lite and things are. If you want to use it, use it. If you don't, don't. There's no support in there at the moment in any of the plugins or anything for async methods. They are all synchronous methods. But you certainly can use it because it's just a compiler type thing, really. So, I don't have a great experience with it, but it should be useful, yeah.
What sort of documentation or learning materials do you have?
So, very little at the moment. There is an article that has gone up on Windows Phone Geek in the last few days about which is a series of articles which will take you through your first app. Beyond that, there are quite a lot of samples published, but certainly one of the things that's coming out in the next couple of months is a big effort to try and get this documented cleanly and properly now, push it through. So the main thing you've got at the moment is kind of 6 or 7 samples. For things like there's a conference app which has kind of got 15 or 20 view models in it, which is quite sophisticated. There's a Twitter search app, which is just a few pages. So it's not great at the moment in terms of documentation. There is quite a good community around it though, in terms of people who answer stuff on Stack Overflow, Java Room, that type of thing. But yeah, you are on the bleeding edge again, if you like. But then, that's where we are in terms of getting the C# across on as well. In terms of learning iPhone and Android, the Xamarin documentation is top rate. It's much better than the Apple documentation, much better than the Google documentation. So in terms of getting those quick starts going, but adding on this MVVM layer, so much version 3 is new and different. It's very difficult, really important. But you're welcome to help write it.
It is fairly non-trivial though.
Yes.
You were saying it's pretty straightforward. It assumes a lot of knowledge, really.
I think in terms of getting started, people get started very quickly on Android because the jump from XAML to XML is pretty small. There are things like these videos. And because there are a few designers around to help you. You quickly outgrow the designers and just dive into the XML. But in terms of moving across to iOS, it is a mindset change. All of the stuff that you got used to on XAML in particular, in terms of layouts and things, resizing, just doesn't happen in the iPhone world. There are advantages to that. A lot of UIs have been built that way.
Is there any book you recommend? There's a model
At this second, there's no authors in there. I wouldn't recommend any of the books at this moment, just because quite a lot has changed in the last few months. So I don't think there's any one particular book I'd recommend. I think I'd recommend starting with the Xamarin documentation online for that sort of thing. And for MVVM Cross, I don't know. I point you at the Codeplex article, and then I'd point you at the samples, unfortunately. And then I'd point you at whatever we can generate in the next couple of months. So there's not much in terms of getting up and started on those. For MVVM, I don't know, is there anyone who'd recommend a particular book for MVVM itself? It just works. That's what it says on there. Yeah, so no, not really.
Which good bit of training on Pluralsight, MVVM.
Yeah. Pluralsight's definitely, if you haven't done Pluralsight before, it's definitely worth signing up for a month for free. And most user groups also find ways of getting a hold of other free subscriptions to Pluralsight. But it's well worth it. It's they are professional, high quality videos on Pluralsight. I'm still working on producing one. It's scary though, it's Pluralsight. They're very good.
What about performance?
So performance, we don't have any measurements on performance, but obviously because you're introducing reflection, it's a good question, Because you're introducing reflection, you are adding an add-on. Because you've got the startup code that kind of looks for value converters and those things, there is an overhead. All I can tell you is that we haven't had to worry too much so far. Yeah, so people have produced things like that Aviva app and the Centric Stage app, and they just work. You touch the button, it moves page immediately. There's no noticeable lag or delay. So there is not a huge overhead, but there is an overhead. I won't deny it. You are substituting developer convenience for user convenience in some ways. So there is an overhead, but it's not huge. So what can say at the moment.
And what about notification services?
So if you're looking to do push, I don't think anyone's produced a plugin at this stage, but there are some really good ways of doing push. One of them at the moment that's getting quite a lot of press is obviously Azure Mobile Services. And they, in the last 2 weeks, have released a portable class library version of Azure Mobile Services. So that kind of gives you an integrated route to do push directly. But really, push is kind of a separate concern. It's more of a server thing in terms of how you can actually broadcast the message. And then when you receive the message, if you're receiving an app, it's just coming into some type of receptor. And then you basically can override that start message. So you can override that start thing to push it to a certain bit of the app. Similarly, another area where you get this type of question is background services.
Yeah.
So when you're running background services, there are a few people who run like live tile type things, Windows, and who run background like location services. But that basically what you tend to do is you take your model code and you separate it out and you give it a separate start for that background thread type operation. Particularly on Windows Phone where you've got this, whatever it is, 6 or 9 megabyte limit of code.
Yeah.
You hit that quite quickly sometimes. So it's not really again to do with the MVVM side of it, but in terms of frameworks, it's certainly something we should have a sample of. But people have done it, it is code. The app that I can't tell you that top secret on has quite a good lot of live tiles going on, and it's cute. And they've come entirely from Windows background. They do have private Windows Store apps, they do have private Windows Phone apps, and it was just, they wrote them first, ported it to Android, ported it to iOS. iOS took a lot longer than Android, but they got it running. And it does look beautiful, it does all. Cool. Oh.
Do you know if the PCL C% has improved yet? With regards to iOS and Android.
So I don't have anything. All I know is that on the Scott Hanselman podcast 2 weeks ago, Miguel said it was being tested in the office. So I haven't seen anything, but it will happen.
Oh, you were referring to the Azure mobile?
Oh, sorry. What
No, I was referring to the support for PCL on the Android.
Yeah, so that's what Miguel Zamarin was on Scott Hanselman's podcast.
Okay.
And he said it was being integrated 2 weeks ago. So at some point...
Yeah, for example, like 2 months ago I looked into it and I found that debugging PCL is not allowed, you can't really start.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting at the moment. What can I say without getting too much? So at the moment the pricing model for Xamarin products has changed so that it's now more expensive to use Visual Studio than it is to use their products. However, things actually work better in terms of Android and iOS when you use their products. And it's the way they develop. They do a lot of dog fooding in-house. So if, I think things will get fixed because I think that they're now fully committed to PCLs. And I think that they are charging a lot of money for Visual Studio integration. So things will get fixed there as well. So, for the last year, there's been so many complaints about, breakpoints have stopped working inside Visual Studio. And they are going to have to fix those now. They're charging $1,000 per seat for that. So,
Might be a straightforward question. How is the data and the noise sentinel being used? Can you show it the noise sentinel?
So they have customers all around the world. So it's a huge company. And basically it's used for, if you're a council, then you need to have noise monitoring in place for roads, for airports. If you're a company and you run a factory, you need to have noise monitoring in place. So it's for their customers.
It's a constant thing.
Yeah. They are 24/7, I mean, I live under the flight path of Heathrow, and it's in the papers every week about noise complaints. So, you know, it's every day noise. You know, if you put roadworks in place for any length of time, you have to have noise monitoring in place for it here in the UK. You know, if you're digging up the road at 8 in the morning, people tend to complain. So that's it. It's a business. But environmental monitoring is obviously quite big.
How do you handle tombstoning?
So tombstoning support is in the latest. Basically what we do is we've decided to try to put tombstoning entirely in the view model. So there are a couple of methods in the view model, reload state and save state. And what happens is when you get tombstone, whether it be on Android or on Windows Phone or Windows Store, you will get called with save state. And when you get untombstoned, the sequence you get called with is first of all constructor gets called, then you get called with init, which passes in those initialization variables. Then you get called with reload state, which passes the state back to you that you saved. And then you get called with start. So if you are doing a fully proper app and you want to support tombstoning, those are the things you have to look at supporting. Most people don't bother. As you probably noticed, don't use that. So, you know, there are hooks into every view model to get that.
Is that new? That's new, the latest version.
And at the moment we don't have a, so for serialization we're using the default one for Windows Store, that's Serialization Manager, which I don't think works entirely that well. And there's somebody who's published a Codeplex project that's an alternative to it. For Android we just save it, so that's fine. And for Windows Phone we actually have a hook and you have to provide something at the moment to save it. But you know, you probably just use preferences or something to save that data for each page.
Will you upload these slides somewhere on?
Yes, I will. But maybe there's a video. Is there a video, or is this just the old private connection?
No, I don't have any fetish. Not socially.
I would be worried if you did. Right, okay, I've talked enough. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much.